Okay, and it looks like we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's great to have you with us today. My name is Sarah Lennox, and I'm the Chief Growth Officer with DeNovo Treasury. So I run marketing, sales enablement, and I also oversee client experience. Today, we have a partner of ours with us, and I have Kevin with Identifee. Kevin, if you want to do a brief intro, we'll start
Yeah,
getting into our introductions and go over the agenda and set the mood for the rest of today's webinar.
nice. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So, hey, everyone. My name's Kevin Miyamoto. I'm one of the founders of Identifee, and Identifee is an AI workspace built specifically for banks and credit unions to acquire, service, and grow. So great to be here. It's always great to talk with you, Sarah, and yeah, looking forward to the session today.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so just to set the agenda, thank you for joining, folks. If you're not on with us today, but you registered, don't worry, this recording is going to be sent out after we are all wrapped up. We do have a live Q&A at the end, so don't be shy. If you have any burning questions you would like to ask about AI or AI strategy for your community financial institution, pop those in, and toward the end, Annette will go over those things with us. But further on introductions, DeNovo Treasury started because our founder saw a gap in the market. The big national banks have entire teams dedicated to innovation, while smaller relationship focused banks and credit unions are left trying to navigate this new landscape on their own. So, DeNovo Treasury's mission really is to help the smaller financial institutions grow in treasury management and commercial or business banking, and to also help keep them competitive in their markets and competitive with the right product offerings and the technologies. So, that's kind of where AI and things like AI kind of come into play for us. And it seems like many of you would agree. Recent data that we have shows that about 70% of banking organizations are already exploring how to use AI or how to implement AI in their operations. So if you joined us today, you're in the right place. Let's dive into what that actually looks like. Annette, if you want to go ahead and advance. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I think I kind of covered a little bit of what our goal was today there. So just moving on to what the current landscape is here. As we mentioned, there's a pretty significant majority of financial firms out there that are in the process of adopting AI in some facet, from moderate to significantly complex ways. So today we want to cover some of those ideas that can help you if you're starting out with where should we even begin in finding ways that we can implement AI in our organization, and how we can take a look at all the different tools that are out there to appropriately solve a business problem, and how you can get into assessing risk, staying compliant, and finding good vendors that are going to deliver on those things that you are trying to solve for. Kevin, before we moved on, did you have any other thoughts connected to that?
No, not anything mind blowing. I just know from speaking with hundreds of community financial institutions across the country, everyone is at least looking at AI, if not already using it today. There's actually a study, although this was last year from Microsoft, that said that 75% of knowledge workers, which is everyone on this call and everyone who's probably going to listen to this webinar after, would fall into. 75% of knowledge workers are using AI every single day at work, but the vast majority of those using AI were BYO AI, meaning they're using AI on their own device. And that was from 2024. So that number has only continued to increase. If your financial institution today doesn't have an AI policy, chances are your employees are using AI. You might not know about it, but the majority of banks and credit unions today we do see are using AI and at least dipping their toes in to figure out, is this right for my organization?
Right, exactly. The bring your own AI. That's kind of how I remember. I think that's like what 2023 felt like. Now, that was before I had joined DeNovo Treasury, but I was still working in a corporate environment. And it was very commonplace for people to talk about ChatGPT and to start experimenting with ChatGPT in their daily workflows, kind of even before more formal policies were put into place. it essentially just worked its way into everyone's workflows the same way that you use almost anything else, right? Like Google
Yeah.
in your daily work, doing research to figure out something in your daily work. So that's another theme that even though AI is evolving, um, it's kind of hard to not adopt it considering it's in everything now, right? You have Copilot in Word, you have Copilot in Outlook, you have AI on Zoom if you're a Zoom user versus Microsoft Teams, which you're using today. And then other applications like Adobe. Adobe has its own AI built in. So even if you're not actively experimenting with ChatGPT or some of the other large language learning models, it's kind of already being brought to you as more organizations start
Well,
putting
yeah,
it
and
into the products themselves.
you hit it right on the head, Sarah. Right now where there's a lot of craze and momentum around AI this and AI that. In the future, you won't hear about it just because it's it's just going to be everywhere. It's expected. Even now, if you go on Google, when you search for things, it's all AI generated answers coming back. And if you're on Instagram, like 80 or 90% of the content, at least for me, it's fake. It's all AI generated. And to Sarah's point, even non traditionally kind of data or AI ish type companies like Adobe or Canva, they're integrating AI wherever they can make their users' lives easier. And so what you're going to see is every software company and every company really is going to be incorporating AI if they haven't already, and they almost all have, where it's just going to be normal really here on out. It's just going to be given that you're using AI in some shape or form.
Right. And even if you're not personally using it, it's going to be built into your general web experience anyway. But to get more away from the abstract to concrete things that you can use it for, so just outside of exactly what we just described in regular tools that you might already be using and touching every single day, there are other ways that community financial institutions can deliberately and purposefully start integrating AI, whether that's something that they're using kind of in a BY, bring your own AI capacity, or looking for ways to solve business problems, which then prompts them to have to go find a vendor to work with. So let's kind of move on to talking about what some of those opportunities would look like, and the things that would be a little bit more specific to community financial institutions and banking in general. So, like I said, moving from abstract to more concrete practices. When we talk about using AI, what exactly do we mean? So once it becomes about solving a business problem, it's not about replacing the human touch that makes your community financial institution so special to your customers. It's about augmenting it, right? It's about augmenting processes. It's about augmenting your operations so that you can leverage it to do more of those things that give back value to your customers and give value to your employees too, really. Because if you can make their lives easier, if you can make it easier for them to do more strategic work, more creative work, more collaborative work, generally speaking, you should have a happier team showing up to work and excited about working every day. But
Well,
just some
and I think,
specific
Sarah,
use cases. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and no, I was going to say, I think you bring up a great point, which is, you know, now there's a lot of people or a lot of organizations we see that will throw out Copilot, let's say,
Right.
and maybe they're not getting all the benefit that they thought they would get out of it. And there's actually a recent study by MIT that said that I forget it was like 90 something percent of AI related projects aren't seeing the ROI as expected. And part of
Yeah.
that is because they aren't being specific in the challenges that they're trying to solve. They think AI, if I deploy this thing, my users will automatically know how to use it. They'll know exactly what problems to solve. But to your point, the more specific you can be about, hey, I'm going to try to tackle this one specific challenge with AI and then expand from there, that really is a best practice. And so I think you just nailed it. Being able to hone in on very specific problems and seeing where AI can help out is definitely the way to go.
Thank you. Yeah, big call out. And I think I had this in my scrolled notes for toward the end, but it's certainly something that I'll reiterate throughout, and at the risk of being pedantic, um, always start with that why. I've also seen a lot of chatter lately, especially on LinkedIn and like a couple of other creators that I follow on other platforms talking about this specific thing and the hype cycle and where you might be at on that hype cycle. And there's a lot of pressure, right? As we mentioned, and we talked about organizations that are already bringing the AI to you. It's not so much about adoption anymore, it's already built into most things. There is a lot of pressure for organizations to want to become or rebrand themselves as an AI first organization. Now, that might be right depending on your organization, but that's not a one size fits all thing. And it's certainly not an endeavor that, in my opinion, is specific enough, especially for our space and financial institutions. It really comes down to asking leadership or leadership interfacing with its staff, what business problem am I trying to solve? Once you answer that question and you start looking at solutions, is AI potentially one of those solutions when you think about how you're going to go about solving that? So I think I have listed here just a couple of really good use cases. Annette, if you'd like to advance the slide. If it's not use case slide, okay, that's all right. Um, I was just going to say, and then I think Kevin, I was going to have you cover a couple of more concrete use cases from your personal experience. But my top ones were when you think about things like lending, you can use AI to streamline origination and underwriting. This could mean that your team would spend less time on paperwork. They would spend more time building relationships with the borrowers themselves. You can offer them faster decisions and overall potentially a better experience. Or you can consider another route that's really popular, again, not super specific to just financial institutions, but definitely one that would be easy to adopt considering how much customer service goes into banking. Would be having and deploying a conversational AI that could handle the most routine and common customer questions any time of the day, 24/7. It could help them with onboarding or make personalized recommendations. So it would be kind of like using the AI as a digital team member or an extension of your customer service staff that then free up your staff, your people, to be able to handle the more complex and high value conversations when they're interfacing with customers. And then there's another one that's also popular to mention, which would be fraud detection. The old way, as experts are saying, was reactive, getting an alert after the fact. Deploying different AI tools can be more proactive. It can help you predict and then model threats in real time, which would offer a level of security that potentially was out of reach, especially for some of the smaller institutions that might not have a larger IT or innovation budget at their disposal. But so these were all things that within my research I was able to find use cases and stories about banks and credit unions who've implemented some of these things. So it's not just theory. These things are being implemented and it's all happening now. And Kevin, did you have anything to
Yeah,
segue
yeah,
into or add to that?
oh, for sure. I mean, there's so many use cases with AI and financial services where I don't want to say it's endless, but we're just uncovering, we're at just the tip of the spear. I mean, a
Mm-hmm.
couple that come to mind right now would be if you're in payment operations, being able to look at not your rules in AI. Again, it seems very small, but if you're in payment operations or in ACH ops, maybe you have to look up rules in the not your rule book frequently, or you need to then look up rules, look up the UCC Cornell Law website that everyone looks at, or the Green Book, right? And being able to just query those things and get answers back within seconds as opposed to digging in and control F and researching it is just a game changer. And that is like the easiest of easiest use case. But notice it's a very specific use case solving a very specific problem for specific users. It's not just a generic tool, right? Um, another big use case that a lot of our customers use is generating RFPs. So I don't think I've ever heard anyone said, "Oh my gosh, I just love writing 50-page responses to RFPs." And with AI tools out there, you can create agents and load it in with your content. So all of your security docs, all your products, you can tell it what type of tone to write in. And as opposed to just, drafting each response over, you can load it in an AI and have AI draft a lot of responses there. So that alone would save hours upon hours. And finally, another really good use case for us is, um, being able to perform company research. So as a sales rep is getting ready for a call, rather than having that sales rep go on Google, read the company website, go on LinkedIn, figure out benchmark or relevant data for that customer, all that could be automated within a few seconds using AI now. And so those are three that our customers are using today that they're seeing a ton of value on. But again, this is just the tip of the spear. There are so many more use cases that are being used today, and a lot of them that are yet to be discovered because it's still a fairly new technology. So there's a bunch of stuff out there.
Yeah, it's new and it's evolving every single day. So just I think as of 2025, I've heard more this year than maybe even the beginning of the year or the prior one about agentic. So no longer are
Yeah,
we just talking about bots and like chat GPT or really chat GPT. The way that people refer to chat GPT and prompting chat GPT as talking to a bot, agentic AI is like a whole other level of what they thought or what people commonly thought of a bot being. Um, are you able to kind of break down for everyone? I noticed
yeah.
when we were speaking a couple of weeks ago at one of the conferences, I had gotten a couple questions about this. Although I don't have this in my notes, I figured it would be a good one to kind of tackle head on because it is so relevant. And you could log on to LinkedIn right now, and I assure you, there's probably somebody on there in your feed talking about agentic AI.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of kind of definitions being thrown out there. When I
Mm-hmm.
think of when I think of agentic workflows or agentic AI, it's when an AI performs a series of tasks back to back and ultimately performs an action without the need for any human interference or human touch. Okay. So what I mean by that is let's say that you wanted an AI agent, and think about an AI agent as like a bot or like you know, and you want them to review documentation from this database and score it based on this, and based on the score, provide a decision yes or no, and then log all of that into your CRM. That's an agentic workflow because the agent is doing everything from start to finish. Okay. So that when people say agentic, that's what I think of. Now, I will say when at Identifee and there's other banks that I and credit unions who I think would agree with how we're doing it, which is we're concerned about the workflows, which is do all the research, gather all the documentation, perform an analysis, but then leave that last decision to a human. Okay. And we still at this point, and listen, I own an AI company, and I would be the first one to tell you it can still make mistakes. Okay, so that's I think that's normal, and people who use AI will tell you that it can make mistakes, whether it's providing incorrect information or whether the user is not putting in the correct prompt. It's still prone to mistakes. So take that with a grain of salt. Um, for our customers, we want them to have that the capability to adjust or review things before it gets sent to a customer. Now, the flip side to that would be that there are lots of people out there in the space that are saying, hey, AI in the next year or two, or 5 years, or whatever it may be, is going to be smarter than the sum of humanity. So every person on Earth combined, AI will be smarter than. And so then the question is, do you want Kevin Miyamoto deciding if you should approve a loan, or do you want something that's smarter than the sum of humanity deciding whether to approve it or not? And that's a question that we're all going to be thinking about over the next couple of years as this thing progresses. And in terms of progressing, I mean, the models are getting so advanced. Every week, there's like a new announcement about a new model. Even right now, as we talk, Gemini 3 from Google is going to be announced any day. And that is, it should be, according to rumors out there, it's going to just be game changing. But after Gemini 3, I'm sure Anthropic will come out with a new one. I'm sure after that, Grok will come out with a new one. So they're just constantly evolving. And I can get into the specifics of how some of the things on how they evolve. But at this point, I always like to think about everything in terms of workflows and not agentic workflows just because of that, uncertainty with it doing it from start to finish.
Right. Or again, going back to jumping on the bandwagon, so to speak, or trying to adopt for the sake of adopting so that you can feel like you're doing something progressive with the new technology. Maybe it's out of fear that you're going to be left behind, or maybe it's out of fear that organizations that market themselves as being AI first and up to date with all the latest technology, all the latest models, even those AI first companies, and Kevin, obviously you own an AI company, so you could probably attest to this, as they continue to develop models, you as the company are forced to kind of evolve along with them with all of those new releases that are happening constantly. So it's sort of like an almost never
Yeah.
ending loop of progression and the newest and best thing that's on the market right now. And they're just kind of constantly adopting and adapting as AI gets smarter or as humans continue to release smarter versions of AI.
Yeah, and I think it might be beneficial for the group if I just explain very high level how kind of the trains of thought with AI. So the first train of thought is what you call fine tuning a model. Okay, so
Mhm.
let's say that you work with a vendor and they say, "Oh, we use our own proprietary models to do XYZ." What they've actually done is they've downloaded an online open source model. So they've downloaded a model and actually tweaked the model and made it specific to their own use case. Okay. So this is extremely beneficial if you have something very complicated, and you want it to perform exactly a certain way. The
Mhm.
problem is that one, you have to download it and then you yourself or your team has to tweak it. And then two, in order to tweak it or add new things to it, you can't just add it. You have to like go in there and tweak the model. And so it's expensive and there's a lot of work to tweak the model. And because of that, the vast majority of AI companies do not do that. The vast majority of AI companies are what's called AI wrappers or AI apps. Okay. It's essentially a piece of software that is powered by one of the top large language models. So at Identifee, we just announced a huge partnership with Google, and
Mhm.
Gemini is powering our AI. There's lots of companies that might have their own AI, but it's really behind the scenes, OpenAI or ChatGPT or Anthropic, Claude is another big one, where
Mhm.
they've built apps around these large language models. And to your point, as the models evolve, you get the benefit of having better technology. And so, you know, in order to leverage that, there's this whole other thing that I can get into. It's called RAG, but you have a RAG and you have the models, and essentially, for you to quote train the on your own information, it's as simple as loading information into a folder and then tying a little chatbot to a folder. And so, let's say, Sarah, that you were to ask a question, uh, "Who is Kevin Miyamoto?" And you ask the question, and if there's a database attached to it, it's going to look for information about who is Kevin Miyamoto. It's then going to chunk that information into bits and pieces, re-rank it in order of relevancy, and then send the query of who is Kevin Miyamoto and the chunked information to the model like Gemini to be answered and then returned back. So that's kind of how it works, okay? Now, the benefit of doing it that way is that in order for you to quote train it, you're not really training it, you're just adding content. But in order for you to, upload all of your content and be able to ask questions on your content, takes seconds because you're literally just uploading it into a database, okay? And all these providers make it really easy to do that. And so if you wanted to upload 20 documents and query those documents and get answers back, you could easily do so, but that's using a RAG and then a public model like a Gemini or an OpenAI without building your own. And then for you as the user, it's actually in a lot of cases uh, uh, almost better because if you sever the relationship with a company that is fine tuning the model with your information, the only way for them to not have access to it would be for them to delete their entire model, as
Mhm.
opposed to if you're leveraging, working with a partner that uses the RAG system, which I just described. It's as simple as deleting all the files in the database, and they don't have access to it. You're not asking them to delete any model, and so there are pros and cons with both. But again, 95 to 99% of the market out there is doing what I described, which is building their products and services around these large LLMs like Gemini, Claude, and um, OpenAI.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, it's probably a pretty good segue into when we talk about some of these innovations and how we balance that with trust, how we balance that with safety and compliance, because that's probably top of mind for a lot of you folks in the audience. And I know what some of you might be thinking. That all sounds great, but you might not have a dedicated AI team or AI experts or a massive IT budget to take a look at those things. All of those vendors on the market that offer those solutions that are, again, they're using that system and they're built on the big LLMs. How do you discern who's a good vendor and who might not be when you start getting into, like we had mentioned, you're going to look at a business problem to solve, and you're looking for ways that you could potentially solve that, either using your in-house teams leveraging AI tools or going to a third party vendor to take on some of those larger, more strategic initiatives. So, how do
Yeah.
you do that innovation without taking on huge risks?
Good, great
Right.
question. And I see some of it on the slides here. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you want to go through that and I could chime in, or do you want me to chime in now?
Oh, no,
Totally up
go
to
for
you.
it. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you have it on the slide, but again, you start with a very specific use case and you start with non-sensitive information. And
Yeah.
notice the theme with Sarah and I, it's you should test it. You should test it. And so if you're talking to a provider and they say, "Hey, we don't let you just test it. We guarantee it's going to work, but you need to sign a year agreement." Run away because they're lying to you. They don't know for sure if it's going to work. They have a very good understanding, and they should be saying things like, "Yes, this should work," or "Yes, it should perform this way." But really, the only way for you to tell is to test it. And so, what I find is all the good vendors out there will at least let you test it, or they'll run a test for you and they'll share their screen with you and at least let it run. But they should be testing and doing live demos and testing for you because the it's being generated on the fly. Like they can't guarantee certain outputs because the model is creating those outputs. Okay. The other thing that I would do here is I would start with things that don't require any customer information or sensitive information. And once you build trust on that, then you can maybe start to add it from there. The biggest things from a security standpoint would be if you're going to start to add in sensitive information. One, you want to make sure that that vendor is, SOC 2, Type 2, pen test and all, and they're good there. Two, they're working with models that have 0-day retention so that the models are never retaining any customer data. And three, most importantly, they have security protocols in place so that anything that you ask, any response you get back, any content you upload, under no circumstances ever used to train the model. So those are the three big ones that we look for, and the vast majority of enterprise AI companies already do that today. So that
Yeah.
should not be that hard to find. But those are absolute table stakes for any FI working with them.
Yeah. Kind of wish the red flag meme was still in circulation. It's popular and relevant because that would have been like a perfect one to add to the slide when everyone was
Yep.
seeing that. Unfortunately, I work in marketing, so I think in memes and fonts and graphic design all day. But thank you for sharing. Those were really good call outs. Like Kevin said, the key is to balance those innovation endeavors with that trust. And again, if you're a smaller, more lean organization and you don't necessarily have AI experts or enough on your IT staff or the IT budget, you kind of have to acknowledge the resource gap, but you can't and shouldn't try to match some of the tech giants. Instead, try to find something that is going to work for you and your business case. And be smart and strategic about the things that you select to run those first couple of experiments, right? AI inherently is experimental. So you experimenting with AI is kind of like an experiment on top of an experiment. At least that's the way that I like to think about it. But again, make good choices around security and the things that you are going to use for that experiment. I'm sure your risk, compliance, and legal
Yeah.
folks would love to have a seat at the table for those conversations when the more creative, visionary minds and organizations are dreaming big about the things that they could potentially solve using AI as the tool. But that
Yeah, and a
means
couple
like
of
when you're
couple
looking
other
at
things,
that,
Sarah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yep.
a couple other things that are not even AI really related, but
Right.
good question to ask yourself. Who do you want to what admin do you want to be able to upload all the data or content for the rest of the team? Do
Ooh,
you
that's a
want
good
the
one.
team to have Yeah, do you want the team to have access to that information? Um, do you want every user on the team to be able to access all the content and or search the web, right? Um,
Mhm.
are there specific use cases that you want? So those are all things that a lot of them aren't really AI related, but they do require some thought up front. Another popular tool that's getting a lot of traction that, as anyone has heard me talk, you've heard me talk about this, is called an MCP, Model
Yeah.
Context Protocol, which essentially enables AI to connect to a bunch of different apps. So if you want to connect your Gmail or your Outlook and Slack or Teams or whatever, Salesforce, you can easily connect it through an MCP, and then you can query from a chatbot. So if you wanted to just type in a chatbot, hey, tell me about ABC company, create a new ticket, then send an email to Annette or Sarah. It can do all of those things sequentially across all of these different apps. When you do that, it becomes an absolute game changer. But as going back to security, you might
Mhm.
not want your team to have access to MCPs because you don't want to link to anything. And so there's a lot of things that folks could do to make it more secure and fit within their AI policies. The one thing I will say, when I think about AI in community and regional financial institutions, I see this as a great time to actually. I know you said like, and it's true, Sarah. They don't have the teams to really innovate and focus on just AI. Like Chase is spending whatever billions of dollars a year on AI. I don't
Right.
expect you to do that, but AI can certainly be a great equalizer between the community bank and the Chase because it's a new evolving technology, and you all are evolved. Like you're seeing it live together, and the capabilities that a Chase might have. There are lots of vendors out there, Identifee being one of them, that can
Mhm.
provide very similar, if not better, services, right? Or you can quote train it by uploading your content, you could share content, you can create reports, all that stuff. There's lots of providers doing that. And so I would just say for folks listening on the call, don't just because you work at a smaller organization, don't be discouraged. There's organizations out there that are teeny tiny that are really innovating and reaping the benefits of all of this. So that's my I'll get off my soapbox and stop talking about it. But I really do think this is actually a great time for community financial institutions to be thinking about it and to be innovating because it's their time to kind of close that gap.
Yeah, I love that. That's the core of what we do with DeNovo Treasury and our consulting services. And I like the word choice. It's an equalizer, right? This is a good
Yep.
opportunity for not just financial institutions, but for smaller community or regional financial institutions to seek equity through adopting technology so that they can actually compete with some of the larger banks or other fintechs too that are coming onto the market and kind of taking away customers from banks of all sizes with their own solutions. So
Yep.
that's another one that can kind of be forgotten about. There are different competitors, not just limited to other financial institutions out there that might be already in the ear or in front of your business clients, especially among small businesses. A lot of the fintechs go after smaller businesses who are looking for a solution that's a little bit more feels a little bit more like a consumer styled solution than a business styled solution, I guess I would say.
Yep.
But anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. All that to say that it is a great equalizer, and that's really where the opportunity lies. Once you get past the aforementioned steps
Well,
of
and
identifying
let's
what,
let's
go
go
ahead.
through that tangent though. Let's go through that a little bit more because I think you bring up an amazing point.
Okay.
I was in San Francisco last week for TechCrunch, which was great.
Oh,
And
okay, super.
I saw a sign for Brex, and Brex is touting themselves as the next best business bank. And as we
Mm,
all know, they're not a business bank; they're a service provider, right?
right.
And so I say that because whether you like it or not, every FI, every bank, every credit union, you're competing with service providers like Brex.
Yeah.
Okay. And while you might not be able to compete on the technology side, the biggest benefit is there when a customer calls your bank or service provider like a Brex, and they have questions about ACH rules and and RTP and other payment rails,
Yep.
that's where your FI shines. It's not necessarily the technology. It's it's all about um, it's all about the insights and education that they're providing that business. And so
Yeah.
with AI, one of the biggest use cases is being able to generate and find insights on your customer base in seconds and being able to hyper personalize interactions and communication with that customer to drive results. And if you're a big bank or a little bank, you could be doing that right now. And there's tools out there to do it. And so, again, just another example of you're competing with a lot of folks in the market, but why do they go to the banks and credit unions? Because of the trust and the education and the advisory services. And
Mhm.
AI can really help speed that along.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Ended up being a relevant tangent to the
Yeah.
core message here. So thank you for the additional color around that. I think the only thing that I necessarily had to note around this risk management framework means that I think you delved into this, but prioritizing things like explainability. You had mentioned because AI tools are going to continue to get smarter and smarter, the human in the loop model of adopting AI and using AI is going to remain crucially important when you're looking at things like balancing risk and compliance frameworks. So if an AI tool makes a decision autonomously, if you're going to be using agentic, you need to know why. It also means that you would want to focus on the data accuracy, which is probably going to be a top concern for banks and credit
Oh,
unions.
that's another brilliant point, Sarah, is the data. Okay.
Yes,
As
yeah,
we know, what's the old adage? Crap in, crap out,
crap
right?
out.
And how many there's so many financial institutions that have data across a core, across ACH, wire, merchant platforms. None of it talks. It's not householded correctly. And so even if you wanted to leverage AI to be able to perform a number of tasks, if your data is garbage, you're going to get garbage out. It's not a miracle worker. Now it'll help speed that along, but you still need someone to go through that and cleanse and household all of your data, which in itself is just a ginormous project. I forgot there was a study that came out there that said banks that data cleanup piece will be a humongous focus across all banks in the next 2 years as they're gearing up to leverage AI solutions. And so that data piece, if you haven't already started today, my advice for you would be start with the lowest hanging fruit, probably your core, and build your data set off your core data. But that is I mean, and you know this too. I know you've had a lot of experience working with data in the past, Sarah. That is it's a total pain in the ass to work with. It is very hard.
Yes.
And so there's no better time than now to get started with it because eventually you all will need to get your data in order and cleaned up so you could leverage, really game-changing AI tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had thought about that before we hopped on here, and as I was prepping for the webinar, I was thinking about when I was going through upskilling for business intelligence analytics. Everything that I had learned through that course was kind of like the traditional way, without any kind of AI intervention or AI to support some of those things you mentioned, like data cleaning, data normalization, a lot of the more manual tasks associated with being a business analyst. AI is really good now. I kind of wish, it was good to learn those older frameworks, but now anything that I have to do whenever I have to touch data or analyze something, I'm absolutely using AI for those more manual processes.
Yep.
Because again, when you're a business analyst or a marketing analyst or a market researcher, the value of doing that work and the value that comes with that role is the actual insights, right? The human parts of that where you have to apply your business acumen and
Hmm.
communicate and present something meaningful to leadership and or executives, right? It's not the hours that you spent cleaning up spreadsheets. It's not the hours that you spent normalizing data and getting it to a workable form before you can even do the fun part of analysis or make a pretty dashboard or what have you. AI can help make that process so much more easier, so much more quicker.
Yep.
So you can kind of get down to the brass tacks and start looking at what's in front of you so that you can make business recommendations, so that you can
Yep.
understand things that you are doing the research on faster, better, maybe with even a little bit more clarity and color around it. But you kind of, at least for me, when I wanted to pursue that as something to upskill in,
Hmm.
those parts were the things I was interested in, not necessarily playing with Excel all day long or drowning
Yeah.
in spreadsheets. I was interested in the business aspect and solving problems and learning how to communicate with others and brainstorm with other people on my team around those problems and how we would solve them. So,
Well, and
um,
this is where it becomes crazy because
yeah.
let's say that your data is in order, and let's say that you have your AI chatbot or your solution is tied to your database. Okay. Um, Imagine a future where all you're doing is on your phone, just saying, "Hey, show me my best leads around this," and create an interactive dashboard around this 6 KPIs, and
Mhm.
it'll just do it for you. You could say like email the results to Annette. It'll do it for you. And so I say all these things because once the data is in order, there are so many emerging use cases and ways to leverage the technology that we haven't even thought of, where the way we actually work in the future in the next 5, 10 years will undoubtedly look much different than what we do today because it'll just be so much more advanced and all tied together at that point. And so we're obviously, we're betting big that AI will be a game changer for financial services. So far, I think we've been proved correct, and that'll only increase, but millions of ways to leverage the technology.
Yeah, exactly. And especially because what financial institutions do is so ridiculously data heavy. Um, if I were going to start, that's probably where I would look first when you had mentioned getting all of your data in order, getting things normalized so that you can start using a technology that makes it easier for you to understand what you're working with, understand everything that your core might be capturing or other areas where you're capturing
Yep.
customer data and being
Yep.
able to, again, solve internal operational problems with it or figure out ways to solve other things that you might not have been able to see before that could be going on with your customers.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So I think that's a good segue to as we start to get close to a wrap up here. Annette, if you'd like to advance the slide. Yeah, so again, going to be just slightly redundant, but looking ahead, some actionable tools and next steps if you're thinking about, especially toward the end of the year and you're thinking about your priorities for 2026. But you're asking yourself, how do you get started? Again, it's not about the giant leap. It's about making those smart, deliberate steps and asking the right questions. We're hoping that you leave today with more than just ideas. We had mentioned some specific use cases. And again, if you're still asking or wondering about an approach that would work in your organization, and you still have to work through risk compliance and possibly talk with your legal department on that, we put together some resources that you'll be able to download after the webinar. We have a template for a third-party AI vendor risk assessment, which includes vendor evaluation criteria, like Kevin had mentioned earlier, specifically around things like looking for SOC 2 Type 2, that sort of thing, as well as an AI policy template that your organization can quickly look at, maybe steal some of the language for, and plug and play and adapt where you need to. But we hope that you'll find those things useful. But beyond just tools, we also encourage you all to lean on your greatest asset, which is likely to be your network, and to talk to your peers. There's a lot of really great working groups and user groups out there to explore potential AI use cases. You can also attend things like demos, generally for free. Doesn't really cost much to find education that's available out there. YouTube will forever be a great resource. I'm a big YouTube person. But just get out there and see what others are doing and start learning from them. And then also, we mentioned sort of a phased approach when you're looking at ways that you can experiment. Again, it might be a little bit pedantic or obvious here, but start with your business problem. It'll be tempting for you to want to jump on the bandwagon or start trying to solve all the problems that there are, or looking at ways that you can appeal to some of your customers, especially your business customers, if you're not going to market looking like an AI first organization. You don't need to do any of those things to implement AI and provide good value back to your customers. And your teams and leadership. So once you have identified those friction areas, it's good to start with a targeted pilot project or a high impact but low risk area. It might just be as simple as automating one internal workflow that has your teams completely bogged down with no room to breathe. Or it could be another process that is taking away your team's time from your customer and from talking with them or being able to get back to them in email or written format in a timely manner. And again, always recommending to document everything, measure your results, measure your successes, learn from the process, and then continue to build on that success. And that's how we would recommend to get started. Helps you build a little bit of momentum and confidence as your teams start to learn and grow with the tools as they continue to be experimented with and evolve as we go. Like Kevin mentioned, we're all kind of experiencing AI for the first time together. Did you have anything else, Kevin, that you would add to
No,
practical, actionable next steps?
I think you got it. The last one I would just say is don't be afraid to go on Gemini or ChatGPT and just play around with it on your free time. Once you start asking questions, it's very obvious what the benefits are, and it'll become very obvious what the flaws are. Now don't upload any sensitive information and do anything you're not supposed to do, of course. But in terms of just using it for your personal lives to test it out, highly encourage you all to play with it.
Yeah, good advice. And I think we're going to get ready to wrap up here. Annette, if you wanted to advance, I think the next slide pretty much had it covered with my last bit of notes there. But we thank you for joining us. Now's a good time to open up the floor to Q&A if anyone has those questions. If not, I could probably think of off the top of my head a couple of questions just as I've observed conversations on LinkedIn and conversations that we've had with clients. So Annette, did you happen to get anything in the Q&A chat there?
Stop sharing and check it out. It does not look like we have anything.
Okay. No worries. And I know that we covered like a lot of ground. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a lot of fun, always fun to sit down and nerd out with you and talk about this kind of stuff. I'm sure we'll do it again in the near future. But since we do have a couple of minutes, anything that we might not have covered that you could think of that would be like a commonly asked question when you're in front of prospects or when you're in front of clients?
Not anything other than what we've covered. The biggest thing I can just tell people is, especially for community financial institutions, is that you really now really is the time. If you aren't looking at AI, you should be looking at it because everyone is doing it. And while it might not be anything mind blowing today in terms of like how a lot of banks are using it and credit unions are using it, over the next year or two, there's going to be game changing technology developed that will completely change the way that FI works, and that FI will get a huge advantage. And think about it in 2 years. Do you want to start to build out your AI policies and get an AI focus group going in 2 years, or do you want to be locked and loaded and ready to, take on that amazing game changing technology? So can't stress it enough. I would highly advise you all to start looking and playing with AI today.
Thank you. That's a great way to wrap. Like we said, we covered a lot of ground from the big picture of what AI is to just the practical steps to how to make it work for you, how to start right away, how to get going. But I would say also if there's one like big thing that I would want folks to take away from this is again, AI adoption isn't just for the big banks and the big players anymore. It is absolutely accessible to everybody, consumers, businesses, community financial institutions alike. So it's becoming essential for staying relevant. But that doesn't mean that it has to be intimidating, right? And it doesn't have to be a stressful undertaking either, but tempered with a thoughtful, intentional approach, trusted and compliant innovation is absolutely within your reach.
Yeah,
So
and
I
I'll
think
just
that's a
say
good place. Yeah, go ahead.
one more thing, and I don't want this is a small plug for Identifee, but it really just I'm not saying it to be a plug, but you
Right.
know, for instance, you think about the most progressive, amazing AI products, you might be thinking of the big banks have access to that, right? And
Yeah.
they maybe they're building it and they want to work towards it, right? But there's plenty of software companies out there like Identifee, like we partner with Google. So by partnering with Google, we're bringing all that amazing technology that Google has to offer and embedding it in our product everywhere that is relevant and building it specifically for community and regional financial institutions. And I say that because it's not just the amazing AI technologies reserved for the big guys. It truly is through service providers and third parties available for the masses. And so I would just encourage you to really go out there and explore what AI companies for banks and credit unions and solving specific use cases. But it's a great time to look at some of these third parties because in a lot of cases they do have more advanced, better tools than the big banks have to offer.
Yeah, and that also will save you time from trying to figure out if you're going to do, not that I don't, again, the recommendation we gave earlier was to start experimenting. Um, Even with that, like it's good to experiment, it's good to document things and start learning things, but that can also take some time away from you at the end of the day too. So once you are through that process of identifying your use case and identifying your why, and you go down to the next step to evaluate, are we going to do this internally or are we going to look at third-party AI vendors? Hopefully you'll consider someone like Identifee if it's relevant to your use case. Or again, if you've attended today, you can use the AI risk tracker that you'll get in your email reporting to kind of help you get some of the first steps out of the way when you're going through that evaluation process and when you're shopping for third-party AI vendors for your financial institution. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Annette, for driving our deck and for being here and supporting us. Thank you for everybody who joined the webinar. We really do appreciate your time. This probably occurred over a lot of folks' lunch breaks, but expect to see more awesome things from DeNovo Treasury and Identifee.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to talk with you. Appreciate it.
Always. Take care.